Let's wait some few minutes before we start.
Test one. Testing, testing.
Testing, testing, testing. We hear you.
Thank you.
See you.
I'll mute.
Yeah, I think that we can start. So thank you all for attending this this interim meeting. So this is the first interim DRIP interim meeting we are having this year. So thanks for attending. The note all applies as well. I think that you are familiar with this. No need to go into this in detail. The agenda for today is really straightforward. We had a short, I would say, status update about the current documents, and then we will go through the two pending documents we are discussing in the working group, the authentication and the registry. So Adam will give us, I would say, a bit on this, and he will drive the discussion on the open issues. And then, if there is more time, then we can discuss what are the plans for the forthcoming meeting. Is there any comments to the proposed agenda?
No issues here.
No. Yes.
We just need a note taker, and
Yes.
And repeat that the note well applies for interim as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So Stu is taking the notes. So thank you again, Stu, for that. We really appreciate having your service on this. For the working group document status, we have the 4 documents are currently, I would say, in various levels. We have right now the red, which is currently in the autant 48. So thank you, Bob, for, I would say, promptly replying to the edits from the RFC editor. Yes, Bob?
The comments to DRIP-RID, but I also had just 6 comments for the IPsec-me EDDSA document as well. That one, the editor will take care of very quickly because it was almost like no issues on that. But you saw we had 46 comments to respond to for DRIP-RID, and Well, it's auth 48 and I made it.
Yeah, thank you, Bud. So let's cross the fingers so that we can have the RFC ready for the IETF meeting. Then we have the Arch. The version here is not correct. We have now 30. So there's, I would say, many edits, mainly editorial, and we have checked that we are not making any technical changes. But there is one comment from Eric. We will discuss it later on. And then we have the authent and registry that we would like to see some progress on this. There is this comment from Eric. So Eric, I'll let you, I would say, repeat what you have already mentioned about the concerns you have on the latest version, and let's discuss how we can resolve that as soon as possible.
Yeah, so it's very simple, right? So the IETF is a worldwide community, and the text here about GNSS, which seems obvious, right? But the part to satisfy FAA, which is USA only, specify use by the USA government operated GPS, which is true, right? But it's very narrow focus on the USA region. So I would suggest to rewrite or even remove this part completely.
Which one?
The part that we need obviously to get the time source, and telling the time source get it from the GNSS, which is global, right? Whether it's the Russian even, right? The
yeah.
That's fine. But typically talking about FAA and the USA operated GPS, I think doesn't make its place here in a worldwide IETF document. So simply removing everything from to satisfy until the anti-URS, and until 1.5 second precision. If the sentence still makes sense after, then I will approve it. I'm sorry to be nasty there, right? But yeah.
No. That's really fun, and I'm really happy to see that that you are, I would say, going into details to track the change. So that's good. Before giving the floor to you, Adam, Shuai, did you got this comment from Eric, and do you agree with that?
I'm trying to find which section Eric going to remove.
It's the it's in 8.5.
Yes, I'm on 8.5 right now. I see on the screen. I'm looking for. Let's see, which sentence, right? Both 16-bit. Okay, so starting from F3586 to satisfy FAA read, do we want to remove that sentence, the whole sentence?
No. Only removing or change the wording, but I think the easiest way is to remove between reading, right? To satisfy FAA read, specify use of the US government operated GPS with its sub-microsecond accuracy but only 1.5 precision. You remove this and you start again from end tamper protection. Yeah. So basically to make it applicable everywhere.
Yeah. So just basically remove this sentence.
No problem.
Sorry, Matt, can you highlight? Is that possible? Can you highlight? I want to make sure that we don't have to go through.
You know what? I will propose you the PR, and then you can review it and approve it. So no need you bother yourself.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Guys,
is that okay for with the Stu and other authors?
Yes, we will hear from them.
Testing one. Stu here. Can anybody hear me? Hello.
Stu, yes, yeah. I can hear you.
Yeah, I'd like to tell everybody where this came from, because simple deletion will then cause us to go back to something that doesn't address one of the AD's comments. We're going to have to replace what we deleted with something else. Dave Taylor had significant concerns about time and wanted that addressed in more detail, right? This was my attempt at addressing that in more detail. And I don't know enough about other GNSS systems besides GPS to say what their accuracies and precision are. So I'm going to need some help.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, I don't need to explain for everything, right? GNSS, obviously, right? We all know the principle, gives you the latitude, the longitude, the altitude, and the time, right? There's no way out, right? The precision is a different issue. But if you want to get some, I mean, the accuracy, and you know it, right? On the latitude, longitude, altitude, and timing is the same everywhere, right? I mean,
I don't
if
know
you are
that. I don't know that all GNSS systems provide the same accuracy and precision. Is that the case?
if they provide accuracy on the latitude and the longitude, they provide accuracy on the timing as well, right?
Right, but I don't know what that accuracy is.
But you don't need to state it, right? So
Yeah.
you can even say with enough precision or whatever, right? So I don't want you to go to the whatever, the Russian or the European one, and I guess the Chinese one is coming as well, to get the precision.
Yeah. So
don't
the
overdo
main
it,
point here
basically,
is
right?
exactly. The main point here is to avoid to have something which is really US centric. I agree with Eric. I agree with.
I just need help. I need help because I don't know the numbers for systems other than the US system.
Steve, my point is that don't overdo it. You don't need numbers, really. You need to say there is a source of information there.
Okay.
I mean, don't. I mean, sometimes the better is the worst thing, right?
Okay, can I make a couple of quick points here?
First of all,
for the conduct of this interim meeting, could we please use the show of hands rather than trying to speak over each other? It's really quite difficult to keep track of what's being said when two or more people are talking at the same time. There are two issues here, I think, around this question on timestamps. First of all, this 32-bit Unix timestamp gives me the heebie-jeebies because that timestamp overflows in 2038, which is not that far away. So we need to think about that, whether that 32-bit Unix timestamp is appropriate or not, and if it could be replaced with something else, considering how long this DRIP stuff might be out there. We don't want to be revisiting this in 20 years' time, you know, when I'm an old retired greybeard looking for consulting opportunities, bodging around this 32-bit time overlap. On the question of the precision issues of the GNSSs, I think we need to go back to the first principles and find out what sort of precision is required, both in terms of time of day and for latitude and longitude, that's going to be appropriate for these the drone devices, and then base it from that. My expectation is that all of these global positioning systems that are out there will provide adequate precision and accuracy, but we don't yet know what that precision and accuracy is. But I'm sure that all of these things will certainly be more than capable of making that. Why else would all these governments be spending billions rather, throwing all these satellites up into orbit? And with that, I'll shut up.
Adam, please.
So I'll say two things on this. First off, to Jim's point on the 32-bit Unix timestamp, this is encoded into the F3411 standard. We cannot change it. They have chosen a 4-byte 32-bit Unix style timestamp with an offset. We cannot change that value. We are stuck with it. For other messages in DRIP, sure, we can use a different timestamp. I would agree with you. Be it offset it by some amount or whatever. F3411, for example, sets the second midnight starting in 2019, as it says here in the document. So actually, it's far further out than we think. The second piece to this is F358622 is the means of compliance by ASTM so that F3411 can be used in the United States only. So this whole section piece from the reference of F3586 down, I think is more akin to an example to show in, I believe this is the CS RID section for section 8.5, because it's talking about multilateration, that you have to be aware of these timing situations, and how much the precision of timing and whatever is not our decision. It's actually forced upon by regulation, like the RID rule in the US. So we're treading on a very odd ground here, but I agree in the sentiment with Eric and Med that we try not to be central to a nationality if possible, and only do it if we want to use it as a concrete example.
And if we say, and thank you, Adam, for saying a few things, and not only for agreeing with me. If we say, for example, in the sentence, that's fine. If we want to keep the sentence that I want to remove, just say, for example, then it's completely fine.
And I think that would satisfy both ends, because the sentence was added by Stu to try to satisfy Dave Thaler asking about timing questions, very specific timing questions, but also gives you the context that, look, this is an example, a real world example of why you have to pay attention. So.
Yeah. Eric, do you want to add any other comment on this point?
No, sorry. Should remove myself from the queue.
Okay, so what I will do after the meeting, I will go through the text and propose a PR so that we can discuss it together, whether we remove it or have any example. But I will think about this and send you some proposal once we finish the meeting. So thank you for raising this. I think that we can move now to the next item in the agenda. So Adam, you can have the control on your slides. And welcome, Daniel.
I have to turn on things. Okay. So this is kind of out of order a little bit. So I'm going to go very quickly through at least part of these slides, and then maybe take a pause, and then we'll go into registry stuff. So I'll just start with some external updates for us. So Stu, Bob, and myself, we've been participating in some other ASTM work, specifically A2X, and they're doing security frameworks for aerial to vehicle and vehicle to everything comms. And so far, we're fitting quite well into that framework with no modifications, and we're going to be presenting some stuff tomorrow, actually, to that group about what DRIP has been doing and how it fits. So that's positive stuff. The main sticking point that I think I'm going to talk to about auth is the ASTM ICAO interaction being, and I quote it as stalled because I don't quite know where it is. Basically, ASTM sent an official letter to ICAO to be the registrar for two different fields within their standard F3411. The big one that we're concerned with is the SAM type because it's holding up -auth. And there's been no official response from ICAO yet to become this registrar. So we need to sort out what we're doing. To answer Eric's email that came over about an hour ago, the process for allocation is defined in F3411 in an appendix, and it's a almost verbatim copy of the RFC. I can't remember what the number is, 81 something, but it's the expert review. So they're following the similar process that IANA uses for expert review to handle those code points, or that's what that document says to do. So with the code point, we need to find some resolution. And these are the 4 things I've come up with. And I think Eric might remember a few of these. Basically, we either wait for the agreement to be in place and get the allocations from the certified registrar. ASTM owns the code points, and they own who they delegate those code points to be managed. And they've chosen currently ICAO. And they're setting up an agreement, but we don't know where that agreement is. So it's a hurry up and wait thing. I'll skip to point 4 because I have it slightly out of order here. The other option we have is we could pension to ASTM to fall back to IANA. In talks with Phil Kunel at ASTM, the F-38 chair, IANA to him was the logical next place to go if something happened with ICAO. So we might want to be ready for that, but at the moment on the horizon, it doesn't look like that would happen. So we have 2 more options, and they're kind of the same thing in that we at the IETF and DRIP create a registry in IANA under the DRIP registries to handle the code points in our allocations. But I've said it twice here. We must be very clear that ASTM is the owner of those code points, not us. And what we are doing is not officially endorsed by ASTM. And when the official registrar is selected and set up by ASTM, we must rev our document and get proper allocations and clearly state that they're deprecated, because we don't want 2 different registries running around to do these things. And Eric had said in a previous email that an MOU is needed between the parties, be it ASTM or IETF or ASTM and IANA. I just want to confirm that because there is some confusion, at least on, I think, the ASTM ICAO side in some previous discussions, that there does not need to be any sort of thing. They just set the thing up and then we just show up, ask them for pretty please, can we have allocation? Here is standard, and move on. So I will pause here and we can discuss this very big item.
So, Adam, on the point 3,
Mhm.
I don't think IANA will accept this.
And I don't think ASTM would either. So
Okay.
we're in agreement there. I don't like that point either.
Perfect.
But it's a natural progression from 2. If we wanted to make it slightly larger, not so much in DRIP, but be external to the DRIP working group in some capacity.
Yeah, and regarding the last point, right, the MOU could be a liaison statement or whatever, right? It doesn't need to be signed in blood or whatever. But as ASTM is having the code points, now ASTM IETF, or it will be ASTM IANA, right? Obviously. And that is enough, right? So if ASTM says code point X, X plus 1, X plus 2, X plus 3, it's for you, IANA, allocate it as you want, that's fine. For instance, the IEEE is giving us a couple of OUI, right? So the leading 24 bits for the MAC address. And we do whatever we want with it. So ASTM will do the same thing. So that's the best way from my point of view, right? With my IETF app, ASTM send a liaison statement to IANA. Hey, you have those 4 or 5 or whatever, right? Code points. Do whatever you want with it.
Correct. It's just the I don't want to call it a political problem, but it's the problem that ASTM doesn't want to manage. They don't want to be the registrar for the code points. So they're delegating that out to someone, and they've chosen ICAO currently. And my point 4 is maybe ASTM, instead of ICAO, if that doesn't work out, they can do it to IANA, who's been in the business of doing this for a long time, and delegate that authority to say, you're going to manage that code point space for us and all the allocations in it, so we don't have to deal with it. To be clear, in the appendix, it's the expert review, and by standard, I think, Bob can clear me up if I'm wrong, but effectively what the process is that ASTM has selected for this code point registry is that a party goes to ICAO or the registrar, says, I want allocations, and that registrar reaches out to the two designated experts, or one of them, to get approval, and then a number is selected, and then it goes back to the client. That's the process. Is that clear?
Yeah, and on the point 4, right? So there are usually some critical issue on the ASTM side, but if I'm not mistaken, IANA is already handling at least one registrar for another organization, which is W3C. So
right, there's precedence here. There's precedence that ASTM could fall into and set up something. Bob?
So far, ASTM has not designated the experts. I think they are waiting for ICAO to finish their side. I can ping Phil and Gabriel on that in terms of that. I will get after Salo and Mike. Unfortunately, the Tuesday call we have is during the holiday of Purim, so it's going to be challenging for me on that. But to get it, actually, ICAO has been the area of maintaining registries, if you will, since 1946. They just haven't been up on anything like the internet. They maintain a lot of number spaces, and it's basically telling Salo, is this any different than what you're doing all these other things? So I will push on that again this afternoon.
Yeah, I've poked Phil Cunel a couple of times.
I have seen
they're just waiting. They're waiting back for an official response from ICAO, so it's going through lawyers by the sounds of it. Which
it's past slow. That. I have seen Goodfellow's documents that he maintains over at ICAO. This is really no. It's trivial compared to some of the airplane parts registries that he has to maintain. Okay. Some of those things have like 10,000 entries in. So it's like, come on, Michael, let's do this. So that's on me to get them, because they have, ICAO says they have all the official stuff. It's basically the quote unquote budgeting in doing the work. So
I see Salo on the call, actually. So why don't we?
Is he on the call now? Hey, Salo, he's got his hand up. I turn over to Salo.
Why don't you say something on this?
Thank you, guys. It's two things actually, because I had a comment on the previous conversation as well on the standards for Annex 10. Sorry, for GNSS. Just this tool for your information. If you need all these values, we have it, all of them described in our annex to the International Civil Aviation, the Convention on International Civil Aviation. We call an Annex 10, where we have all defined in terms of GNSS. You can get the values there. I can send to you, and you decide if you use the GNSS values or follow the generic statement that the guys are proposing. That's my first point. And the second on the registries, we received the request, and you know that ICAO is an organization of states. It's not just organizations. It's a state-owned or state-managed organization, and sometimes the coordination in this kind of environment is a little bit more complex than just between people. So we are working on that. We in Prismo have already done the evaluation. We don't see any problem for ICAO to continue to, as Bob correctly said, we have been doing this for more than 70 years. We have been doing this since 1947. And for other aspects, for example, the three-letter code name designators for aircraft and some other aspects as well. But we just need to have the correct conversation here to verify that we are not violating any of the principles of the Chicago Convention. That's the only thing. So we had to contact our legal bureau to provide us some insights, and we are waiting their their communication as well. But we are working on that, and we hope to have a answer as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Salo. So just to get a resolution on this, it sounds like things are moving forward faster than actually we anticipated, which is good. So this is just me being outside of it. Perhaps we can do option one because it sounds like it's around the corner. What is another month? Maybe we wait to the 116 to see where we are and make the final decision there of what of these, well, 3 points now, because 3 is striked out, that we do. Do.
I would just like to inquire of our chairs and our AD whether having something by the upcoming IETF meeting in Tokyo is adequate, and if their answer is yes, to further inquire of Saulo whether he believes that timing is realistic. That meeting will be on, I believe, the 27th of March.
That week, yeah.
I mean, the timing, right, to
To
reply
me?
to your question, is simply without those code points and a firm procedure, right? And I think on the ITF side, it will take 2-3 weeks as well to confirm everything. Oath will never be published, right? That's really important, as you can understand.
Yes. Salo, I saw that you jumped in. You can jump back in.
Because I'm sorry, I didn't get Stu question correctly. So Stu, could you repeat to me? You mentioned something about some dates and I didn't get that.
Yeah, the meeting we're in right now is an interim meeting, and the next actual regularly scheduled IETF meeting, which will include a DRIP session, is in the last week of March in Tokyo. And the actual DRIP session, I believe, will be on Tuesday of that week. And if there were any way to have, some piece of paper by that date that said that, yes, this is really happening, then I think we are able to move forward with the authentication draft in IETF. But my understanding from what Eric just said and has said previously is that without some piece of paper that says this is happening, even if the actual numbers are not yet assigned, then we're unable to move any further forward with this essential DRIP draft.
Thanks, Stu. This clarifies. And as I mentioned before, ICAO is an organization of states. I don't want to promise you that, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to the ATF this time, is because we have an important meeting in Montreal that you are aware of. But I can't promise you that by the end of March, we're going to have solved that problem because it involves not only technical discussion, but also legal discussions. And every time we involve lawyers, things get a little bit complex or complicated. So I cannot promise you that for the end of March, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I will do my best to, trust me, I'm working on that. So I'll do my best.
So then back to you, Adam. It seems like we could say that point one remains, at least until Tokyo, our intended course of action, but we ought to select from the remaining choices, what is our plan B?
Seems reasonable. Eric, I think you can agree on that.
Agreed as well.
Okay.
And crossing fingers, right? My fingers are hurting so much they are crossing.
Yeah, no, mine are too. This has been a long-standing issue, and I'd like to get it resolved, but unfortunately, it is kind of out of our control in a lot of ways. So, we're at the whim of the wind, as it were. All right. So that's the big issue from authentication out of the way. There are 5 open issues on auth in the GitHub. The biggest one that I am worried about is number 29. Number 29 has the term pseudo blockchain to it. And it has been agreed upon, I believe, that the current wording is not quite right, and definitely using the term blockchain is worrisome. So we need to find some alternative to it. So if people can, before 116, come up with something, go to the GitHub, leave a comment on the issue, so I can try to fix this. Because that's one of the big issues. And look at the other ones as well in GitHub, because they are very important. If we have time by the end of this, I see we're running very short on time. I would have been live. I would have live edited here, but we don't have the time to do that. Stu?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I'm the one that originally inserted that phrase pseudo blockchain, and I put the word pseudo in front of it to try to indicate that we were not talking about using necessarily the Bitcoin blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain or any of the particular technologies that exist in the distributed ledger world, but to try to illustrate the concept, right? It works the same way a blockchain works. It does not necessarily require a distributed consensus algorithm. So any text that clarifies how the manifest chain of hashes would work would serve.
Okay. I believe Andre was next in queue. I'll just start from the top. If you're speaking, Andre, we cannot hear you. Bob?
Yes, I'll work on some words. It's basically what we have is the manifest messages are linked through the hashes. So it's just coming up with some kind of a linked manifest or manifest linking. That's all we have to say on this. So let me try to grind out some wording, maybe still today.
I like Eric's response in chat. Replace blockchain with ledger. That is a trivial change, and I think it still gets the point across. We might just add some words to that specific section to clarify what we mean by ledger, but the header to say ledger would be very fine.
Yeah, that would be good enough. That's a nice, good generic. That you create basically a ledger. What you're doing is creating a ledger of manifests.
Yep, I agree with that. Okay, yeah. So everyone for auth, please review it. Obviously, look at the issues on GitHub. Med was nice enough; he posted the link to the GitHub and to that specific issue. But feel free to look at the other issues and comment on them, so that I can make changes before 116. So I'll get into the meat of this now in the next 20 minutes, so I feel like I have to go faster now. Get ready for Whirlwind Atom again. So this is all registries. So just to recap, registries, the term registry was removed, registrar was removed, and we've replaced it with the DRIP Identity Management Entity, or DIME. And the document has evolved to become the DIME architecture, which basically revolves around debt registration and lookup interfaces, specifically of 2 types of information, public and private information. In the text, we can say that this could be part as a function of UTM, particularly of a USS. We've had to clarify a couple different times in different places that this registry actually provides critical pieces for the authentication to even work. So that had to be clarified in auth. And dimes are part of a 2-level hierarchy that the debt is using. And endorsement hierarchy is very similar to the X509 PKI, just augmented by DNS. So again, high level, this is the registration process, requests to DPA, vet information, return stuff, whether you passed or failed. And with passing, things go in DNS and into the private store. For lookup, broadcast RID information is received, particularly the debt. The debt is looked up in DNS to get public information. And one of the things in the public information is a URI that points you to get additional information from the DIA or the data store. And all online lookups are optional to get the extra information to do validation or trust assessment. So this is where we kind of get to the new stuff. In London, me and Jim sat down extensively and discussed a couple of things, and we've been going back and forth since London to get Jim up to speed and to clarify some things. So there is some existing precedent already. DRIP could probably follow the enum E164 model. It's somewhat similar, much like how ITU gets to decide what's delegated in the E164 ARPA zone and all of the national numbering authorities, and it's all a national matter. And I think that's, and Jim stressed to me, that's highly important. So for DRIP, ICAO would be similar to the ITU. Delegation would be handed over, administrative control, and they could delegate the subdomains on a national level via national matters. And ICAO has diplomatic immunity, which is important, apparently, according to Jim. And I don't disagree with that. And once that delegation's done, national aviation authorities operate as they see fit with their laws and regulations. And we might just have to have some requirement-esque things in our document, though probably not that terribly much. So this slide and the image on the right basically is the representation of what we're seeing, where the topmost box, IANA prefix for UAS RID, is that delegation, right? That, hey, ICAO, you're going to manage this. And for this and the text on the left, it's talking about the prefix, specifically the IPv6 prefix and how that delegation would work its way down through the IPv6 address through all of the points of the HIT. Now, I will comment, because Jim emailed me about 20 minutes before the presentation, that we don't particularly want ICANN to be involved if we can help it. So the second point here, similar actions for ICANN in the DNS tree, is a maybe. So it's best to probably ignore that particular point. And of course, transfers have certificates associated with them. And one of the big things that came away from a conversation with me and Jim was there's going to have to be some extensive cooperation between the four parties that you see. And while this particular comment is a little scathing to ICAO, it is just the nature of what they are, right? They are a state-based organization. There's a lot of stuff that has to work for Salo to get his work done. So nothing against them. It's just a slow process. So we need to start sooner rather than later how we want to handle this. Jim proposed a big hug. We get everyone in the room and we all hug it out and figure it out. Jim, do you have anything to say on these two slides before I go on that you want to clarify?
Nothing much from the point of clarification. I just think we need to keep the number of moving parts here down to the barest minimum. And from my perspective, there's no role for ICANN in this model we are suggesting here. There will be a delegation for the IPv6 prefix to ICAO, I would imagine. And then from there on down, ICAO decides who gets these particular prefixes for every part of the numbering space that's issued to the national aviation authorities. So there's nothing there really for ICANN to be involved in. I know we've got this issue about ICAO pursuing the idea of a top-level domain, but the reality is a new top-level domain is a long, long, long way off. I can't see that happening within 5 years, personally. And I don't think that's going to help the situation very much anyway, because we're still going to come back to the same fundamental issues we're talking about right now. I appreciate the ICAO is going to take some time to make up its mind about this stuff. That's just the nature of the beast. And I was very heavily involved in the stuff with ENUM 20 odd years ago. And it was a very similar situation with the ITU. We had to do all sorts of member consultations and discussions in the study groups and all the rest of it. But we kind of were able to jumpstart in the IETF setting because the delegation 3164.APA was handed over to RIPE NCC, one of the RIRs. And then at that point, there was an interim procedure worked out between ITU and RIPE NCC about who got the delegations under E164.APA. Now, we might be able to do something similar to that this time round, but I doubt it would be something one of the RIRs would want to take on. So if you wanted somebody else to run the DNS for, let's say, ICAO.ARPA or whatever we're going to use for that, we're still going to have an issue at finding somebody that's suitably neutral, that can provide a trusted, reliable service. And that, I think, is going to be problematical. The RIRs might fit that bill, but I think the RIRs want to keep away from this kind of stuff now, basically because they're too busy doing their own thing with numbering resources, and they want to just stick to that weird thing and avoid getting into mission creep. They might want to do it as an interim thing, but in it, ultimately, I think probably ICAO may not want to be running the delegations or the DNS infrastructure for this Apex themselves. They may want to outsource it or run an RFP for it. However ICAO chooses to do that, it's fine by me. But we need to figure out a way to make that work. And that's something that we'll probably have to discuss between IANA, IETF, and ICAO.
Salo, I see your hand is up. I also see Eric is unmuted, so I don't quite know what the priority order would be here.
I'm good at any priority to find there. But I just have a simple question, because Bob and Stu, they have been involved in this. Well, first of all, I agree with everything that Jim just said. He knows how international organizations, the UN agencies work, so it's a painful process. And no, my question is more a technical one, because Stu and Bob have been involved in some of discussions with us. And I can see here on the first line that the authority of the prefix would be a /28. Do you have any rationale to show that this /28 is the one who will satisfy the community? That's just a question for my own clarification.
Bob or Stu, can you answer that? Bob.
This fits well in the grain document that we did 2 years ago. Now that was for a complete prefix, which included an area for UAS. This jumpstarts that and is parallel to it. We can easily modify the work that we did in that grain proposal, both for the addressing structure and also for the DNS tree portion. So it is an easy fit for me to work with Olga and Rob to update that document to include this. Then there's the question, of course, Salo, is then given that, how you proceed forward. Now, do I do anything for this in the next week so that it can be included in the TFP meeting at the end of the month? It's the two of us can talk offline on that and get Olga in and see what we can accomplish.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, and just to be clear, for anything here in the document as it is currently written, and in any slides I present here, I'm not trying to pin any particular person in any particular area. It's just I'm grasping at examples a lot of times to like, this is the best person we think could do this, and we're just kind of sticking in the position. So don't feel like we're trying to force you into anywhere. So got 8 minutes. I'm going to quickly rush through the rest of this. So how are we going to use DNS, particularly with DETs? Well, as Jim has pointed out, and we've pointed out many times, a DET is an IPv6 address. So just do what IPv6 addresses do. Nibble reverse them and put them in IP6.ARPA. And importantly, as Jim pointed out in London to me and Stu, or myself and Stu, there is no restriction on what resource record goes in the .ARPA domain. So we could put our HIP, CERT, and NAPTR resource records in that zone. There's no problem with that. Now, Jim pointed out to me that NAPTR is complex, so we have to par it down and make a very simple selection in our document to say this is how you will do it. And effectively, a NAPTR just points to a URI. So it satisfies what we need to do to get the lookup portion working. It's the pointer. So clarifications about serial numbers. Defined by another standard body, ANSI and CTA, alphanumeric, 3 parts. A lot of this is encoded in the RID document. The manufacturer code is similar to a MAC address OUI. It's handed out by ICAO. In fact, ICAO does things with airline codes like this all the time. And unfortunately, from what I could see, at least for the manufacturer codes for the serial numbers, there's no public list available that maps a name of an organization to the code. You get to buy a book. Eric, potentially on your way to Japan, make sure you have enough space in your airline bag because you might get a book for a gift for all the crap I'm pulling you through with auth as a makeup gift. And final point on this is that there are manufacturers already getting assigned 4-character codes, and they're using them. They're putting them in declarations of compliance, like in the US, if you follow the link. So in DRIP sense, there is a further piece to the serial numbers. In DRIP, we could translate or encode a DET into a serial number. And note that I've made those words be in quotes because there is some dispute on exactly what word I should be using there. It's defined in RID, which is going to RFC status. And RID also has this expert about a mapping service that basically puts the registry document on the line to provide this or some mechanism to provide it. And this whole concept is extremely important because there are some modules in UAS RID that can only use the serial number as the identifier. And by allowing us to put a DET or an HI into the serial number, we can do DRIP authentication at minimum and get all of those guarantees, even if the DET doesn't change. So it's an important concept that we should try to support. With that in mind, how do we do this in DNS with serial numbers? Well, if we just treat the serial number as a simple string with no semantic meaning to it, which is partially true, well, we could mimic the nibble reversing. We also have an FQDN scheme that we came up with that we could use. But the big question here, and that Jem knows is the big question, is where do we put them? Is it in .ARPA somewhere? Where? sn.uas.arpa? If we create sn.uas.arpa, do we create a det.sessionid.uas.arpa? I don't know. This is a big open question on how we want to handle this in the DNS. And importantly, when a serial number is mapped to a det, basically alluding to the last slide, there's 2 types of mapping. Either the serial number has an association, i.e., the plain text string has a CNAME to a det, which then has an HI, or the serial number itself is a det/HI that can be translated back and forth. And in DNS, we have to point back to those artifacts, be it the HI or the endorsements. But the last point is very important. We must never, ever map a det to a serial number in DNS that is deemed private, personally identifiable information or private information. So it cannot go in DNS. It cannot be public. I have 3 minutes. So to recap for the DNS at a high level, I'll get to you in 1 second, Stu. For debts, we put them in IP6.ARPA and nibble reverse them and have the 3 records that you see there. For serial numbers, it's either in some sort of ARPA space. I'm selecting SNUAS ARPA, and there's a NAPTA record, or it's SNUAS ARPA with some record that gets it back to a debt, which then gets you back to IP6.ARPA, which gives you all the resource records that you want. TLSA is optional when you do TDLS. And Jim came up, at least with me, an idea of having a different resource record, because resource records are easy to create, to ask and query for what types of resource records are in the zone. And finally, open issues. Registry is still in the document, particularly for these 2 names. Do we want to rename them to something different? There is an issue on GitHub for this specifically. Go take a look at it. I have some options. If we're using an adapter, do we also define URI schemes? With the DNS changes, some of the FQDM forms are not used. Do we want to keep them around? Where do we start all of this? What's the DNS apex look like? How do we put serial numbers in the DNS, as we've alluded to? And Eric made a very good point in January on the GitHub, that the changes that we're making, if possible, should be reflected in -RID before it becomes an RFC, just to make the documents consistent. I don't know if we'll make that window, and I don't know if we want to, but it's now or never for that. With that, with the last 2 minutes, I'll give it to Stu to ask his question, and I open the floor.
I just wanted to make a quick clarification where you said that you can never ever put in DNS the lookup from DAT to serial number.
Mhm.
That lookup does in fact need to exist, at least in the United States, but it can't go in DNS. It needs to go in some kind of a private registry.
Good clarification. Jim? Jim?
I'm not now. Is that never ever map debt to serial number? If I understand correctly, that's an FAA requirement. It may not be the case in other jurisdictions. So we need to be careful that we're not talking about national requirements rather than a global standard for this thing. But certainly we have to take account of that point somehow. I also want to flick back a quick minute back to this issue of NAPTA records. I'm kind of on the fence about that. A URI record would be a lot easier, and we could maybe use those. The advantage potentially of using NAPTers, even though they're horrifically complicated, is you can actually encode the query name in part of the URI that a NAPTA record returns. So if you're doing this, for example, say to get into some specialized web server where you want to log in and get specific information about a particular IPv6 address, then in that case, the URI that's being returned through a NAPTA record could actually include either the whole of that IPv6 address or part of that IPv6 address as part of the login mechanism if that was needed. I don't know whether that's necessary or not, where it might be desirable. It's something that we need to think about. If we just want a simple URI, I would stick with the URI record, but I think there might be some flexibility and advantages with using NAPTers, albeit the NAPTA records are complicated. And if we do go down that path, we'll need to sort of document some rules about not doing some of the really icky things that NAPTers enable.
Right. The NAPTA record is I think a good record and a good suggestion from Jim. It's fiendishly complex. And we have on the other end of this URI-esque pointer, right? Whatever this pointer record is, here it's the NAPTer, that the additional information on the other end is access controlled in some way. And there's a whole section in the document about that. And we need to nail a stake in the ground of what we're going to support in that front. And that will somewhat also feed into what this research record would look like. I see that we're at 12:01, so I don't know how far we can go over without being booted out, unfortunately. And I see Bob's comment that with regard to the DNS examples, he's made it clear there are examples. He doesn't want to make changes to -rid, which is fine, at least on my front. I think I'm done. Unless anyone has any other questions.
Jump in again. I don't think we have to worry too much about the URI schemes because that will be taken care of elsewhere. So
Okay.
if we use URIs, we can rely on the other parts of the IETF machinery that deal with URI schemes to extend that as and when new URI types pop up. So we don't need to worry about that either in an adapter record or a URI record, as far as I'm aware.
Right.
So does it sound like a good discussion for Yokohama?
Yes. Yeah, it's a very good discussion for Yokohama.
Because usually DNS discussions are very short, so
yes.
Jim,
Yeah.
don't start.
Famous last words.
famous last words. How big of a slot can we have in Yokohama? 3 hours, 4 hours? How long do we want to go? Just so that everyone is aware, myself and Stu will be in Yokohama physically. I believe Bob cannot make Yokohama in person due to ICAO stuff, so he gets to go have fun with Salo instead.
Yes, I'll be with Sal instead, and I'll be on the call, God willing, 2 a.m. in the morning.
It's a tough job, Bob, but somebody's got to do it.
Right. It is
Stick it
billable
on the old
hours,
man.
so
Yeah.
Stick it on
And
the
as,
old man.
as people often have said to me when I've been in unpleasant situations with antisocial meetings at times that are unpleasant times of day, better you than me.
So yeah, my parting shot is check the GitHubs for both auth and registries. There are issues there. Comment on them, make more issues, make comments, pull requests, whatever. I will do my best to answer and get to them as fast as possible.
Okay, so yeah, I think we have some time before that meeting, so we should try to make as much progress as we think can be done before the meeting. So the meeting is not a recap of the issues, and we can actually close those issues once for all.
Yes.
Hopefully,
correct.
not all, but
not all of them. I don't expect all the issues to be closed in 3 weeks, but if I can get a good chunk of them out and open more issues, if more issues are open, that's great. I would love that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so thank you everyone for that meeting. It was I think worth being made. Maybe we should think of having more interim meetings, but we will check that in Yokohama.
Thanks.
Thank you everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Salo, for being
nice
present.
evening.
See you guys.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Bob, we need to talk.
Bye.
yes, let's schedule a talk.
Okay. I'm gonna send you a message so we can have a chat. You, me, and probably Stu involved as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.